Hello everyone and welcome to a new Infinity Kingdom video. This is Kincaid from server M14 and let's continue the tier lists we were making about all the immortals in each and every position. Last time we made a tier list for all the defense immortals, and this time we're gonna make a tier list for all the damage dealers in the back row. I don't like to make a separate video for the mages and the ranged immortals, so we're gonna combine them all in one video, since there is only one damage dealer in the back row that you can use in the current meta, at least, because you cannot use two damage dealers in the back row. This is a terrible idea. Do not do this. But you need to at least use a support immortal with the right specializations in order to make use of the current meta and be able to compete with other players. So here's the tier list we prepared. We combined, or we gathered, all the ranged and mages immortals into one tier list, and let's just begin. It will be divided into overpowered, very strong, decent, useful out of PvP, and garbage. So let's start with of course, the chaos immortals. We got Medusa right now. There is none are using Medusa right now. Nobody's using it because nobody managed to max her in the last event or even unlock her artifact. However, looking at her skill, she will be so broken. She provides control, she applies control, and if the opponent was in immunity to control, he will receive more damage. And she deals damage on her passive deals damage, so nothing can stop her actually. Even the skill that reduces the energy, the knife through butter. So just looking at her skill, looking on paper without the need to look at any reports, she will be so overpowered. I believe she needs a tier on her own, but we still need to look at some of the reports. And then we got Apollo, one of my favorites. He got the highest base damage out of all the immortals. I mean, looking at his skill applies 750% damage, and of course, if you have the artifact, this damage is increased by another 30%. So, which makes him so broken. So Apollo goes to the overpowered tier, and of course Loki goes to the overpowered tier. Even though Loki does not have as much damage as Apollo, at least at the base damage. However, Loki is a mage, which means that he can use a crit rate artifact, and he can use a skill such as infinite firepower, which makes him actually very, very powerful to use. So he goes to the overpowered tier list, but keep in mind that these immortals are so expensive. So let's keep looking at the other immortals that we have. We have Margaret. She's absolutely garbage. I don't like her skill. And of course, if you would like to use a water march, there's Merlin, who's so much better than Margaret. Her skill is so useless, and she doesn't really add that much into the march. We have Nepo. Nepo is actually, I don't want to call him a ranged immortal, but that's what he is currently. He's a support immortal. That's actually how he was launched at first. If you look at his skill, he actually increases the heals, and he increases physical damage, and he doesn't deal damage. He doesn't deal that much damage. His damage ratio is very low, but his energy regen is quite decent, and he have an initial energy at his passive. But still, I don't think he's good as a damage dealer at all, so he goes to the garbage tier. He's not even useful in PvP. Synduke, well, once upon a time, Synduke was one of the, not actually one of, but she was the absolute monster of the game. She was so powerful that they have to change her skill description in order to nerf her, to cancel the synergy between her skill and what was the skill name again? The skill that was used on her, which is, yeah, corrosive power. They had to change the skill description in order to cancel this kind of synergy, so she was nerfed. However, she is still quite decent in my opinion. I think you can still use her, and she's even useful out of PvP. You can use her against Spider, or against the Rift Breaker, or the current new bosses in the legendary season. So I will place her in the useful out of PvP. I don't think anyone is using her in the main march right now. We have Hammurabi. I think Hammurabi is decent. He's not very strong. He's just decent because there is Genghis Khan. You cannot use both together, and Genghis Khan is so much better than Hammurabi. Jenkins can apply wounds. His skill is so powerful. Hammurabi could be tricky to use. He's a mage and he applies a lot of damage, but still Jenkins is so much better. We have Arash. Arash is similar to Yushi Tsuyon. Their skill is very similar. However, Yushi got a bit higher damage. I'm building Arash in the moment because he will be so useful against the bosses in the legendary season. His skill applies 3 instances of damage. The first and 2 shots applies damage and reduces something. The third shot deals a very high damage. And I think the first and 2 shots reduces the physical damage, and the third shot removes the barriers or the shields that could apply from Charles. His skill is useless in PvP, but he's very useful out of PvP. He is very good against the bosses, just to make it clear. His skill is similar to Yushi, so Yushi of course goes to the useful out of PvP. I'm trying to make this as short as possible. I don't want to make the video very long. And we have Atlanta. Atlanta is very tricky to place because, well, let's just say she goes to the overpowered tier without any comments, because there's a lot of players who love Atlanta and I don't want to get into trouble. That's all I'm going to say about Atlanta. We have Baldwin. Baldwin was one of those very powerful immortals. He was nerfed recently, so he's still decent. His skill applies so many damages, so he synergized well with corrosive power. And if you have a skill such as the one in these packages, I forgot the name. Which skill is it? Yeah, Posionic Tide. Posionic Tide is very powerful on Baldwin and corrosive power. You cannot use both skills, or you can. Yeah, you can. You cannot use Posionic Tide and Energy Mastery actually, but he's still a very powerful immortal, and he was nerfed recently. They removed the 30% damage increase from him, which was actually a hit to his ultimate skill. However, I still see some players who are using Baldwin in a decent way. We have Ashoka, absolutely garbage. We have Yusungai, garbage. We have Himiko, she is very strong. Himiko is still very powerful, even though I think that she was secretly nerfed recently. She doesn't deal as much damage as she used to. However, I think Himiko is still one of the best back row immortals that you can use. Her exile is still there. She can exile an immortal for 6 seconds if he was not immune to control. And this is actually a nightmare to any back row immortal who doesn't use Fighting Master. And of course, since she is a shadow immortal, she gets a damage increase against all the regular elements. An increase of 25% or maybe 20%, I'm not sure. And her damage is actually quite high, 450% plus the 30% that you get from the exclusive artifact. And we have Elizabeth. I think Elizabeth is still usable. However, since she's not a very expensive immortal, she goes to the decent tier. She can actually be unlocked by the VIP packs for only $5, or you can get her fragments through the random shards that you get from the ship. And once you unlock her, you will be able to build her fragments from the market for gems. And the drop rate for Elizabeth, I think, is quite decent, 2.7%. So with time, you can actually grind her fragments and build her quickly, and you can use her. The skills that you can use on Elizabeth is similar to Gilgamesh, since she deals a lot of continuous damage. So you can use Blade Vortex and you can use Executioner. However, she is not that powerful. I need you to keep this in mind. She's not that powerful. However, she is still useful. Since, of course, she's a Shadow Immortal, she gets a 25% damage increase against regular elements. Gilgamesh is still decent as well. If you have seen my previous video that I made about Gilgamesh, he's a free-to-play immortal. You can build him with soul crystals from the market. His drop rate is very high. I mean, compared to other immortals, very high, 4% for the shards. And of course, the damage, the continuous damage, similar to what I said about Elizabeth. You can use Blade Vortex, Executioner, and he will be very powerful. And of course, he goes to the decent tier. I think he might end up at the very strong tier since he's a free-to-play immortal, considering his price. But I'm gonna keep him in the decent tier for now. We got Merlin. I would like to place Merlin in the very strong tier since he's actually very strong. If you have seen the video I made about Squidward Smart, he's using Merlin, and Merlin is very powerful. He got one of the highest base damage ultimate skills in the game. He's seriously an underrated immortal. And of course, this damage increased by 50% if you have an immortal that can apply chill. The immortals that can apply chill are either Artemisia or Dedo, but I prefer Artemisia for so many reasons I mentioned in her video, the video I talked about the support immortals, so you can go and check this video out. However, Merlin still goes to the very strong tier. He's not as powerful as Himiko, of course. However, he's so cheap to build. He's basically a free-to-play immortal. You just need to unlock him, and then you can build or get the shards for soul crystals from the market, and then you'll end up with a maxed Merlin for free, and he's powerful. Empress Wu is actually tricky to place right now. She's still powerful, however, she lacks the skills that synergize with her ultimate skill, because she counts a lot on the critical damage, so you have to use a skill such as Chase. However, Chase is kind of out of the meta right now because the damage is very low and there's no similar skill to Chase that can be used on Empress Wu. And there's a lot of skills that she needs to use, but at the same time, you have to use a skill such as Fighting Master in order to keep her safe from the control. So she's very tricky to use. I would like to place her at the very strong because I'm biased and I like her, but I'm gonna place her at the decent tier for now. However, I think that Baldwin is way more powerful than Empress Wu, but still she's a free-to-play immortal, so I'm gonna place her at the decent tier. Genghis Khan, I think, in my opinion, that Genghis is way better than Himiko at the moment, because, hear me out, Himiko doesn't apply wounds, so you have to use an immortal such as Kin Emperor with her if you like to apply the wounds. However, since Genghis Khan can apply wounds, you can use an immortal such as, where is she? Matilda, the one that increases damage and increases his energy regain, which makes him gets more value from the support immortal that he's beside. And he applies a lot of damage. He's a lightning immortal and a lot of people are using earth marches, so he still gets the damage increase or the counter damage increase, which is 25% against the elements that you counter. So he's still very powerful and he's still very strong. I would like actually to place him in the overpowered tier, but I think when it comes like comparing Genghis Khan to Apollo, I think, yeah, I think we might actually end up at the overpowered tier. He's way better than Himiko right now. And if you have the red skills to support him, I mean, if you have energy mastery and if you have corrosive power, he's gonna be a beast. And of course, if you have a skill such as the one that increases the critical damage and the physical damage and the crit rate, timed shine, he will actually be more powerful. I mean, if you compare the prices, he's way cheaper than Himiko. He's basically a free-to-play immortal if you like to grind him and build him with the gems from the market. He's gonna take so much time, but at least you can obtain his shards for free. Cleopatra, she is quite decent because I like her and I used her for a very long time back then, and she reduces the critical damage by 30% or 35%, I think, for 9 seconds. And I still have her maxed. It reduces the damage, the magical damage, by 35%, which is a very high percentage. And she still deals a bit decent amount of damage. However, she goes to the decent tier. She's a free-to-play immortal, of course, and she's very useful at the early game if you'd like to build a full Earth March. Cleopatra will always be there. And her artifact increases the duration for the damage reduction from 6 to 9 seconds, so she can actually reduce the damage for the mages against your march. This is my final tier list for all the back row damage dealers, combining mages and ranged immortals. Of course, we need to look at more. We need to look at more reports from Medusa. We haven't seen anyone using her yet. Maybe by the next event, people will start using her. However, for Apollo and Loki, we have enough data, and for Atlanta, I don't want to get into trouble, so I'm placing her at the overpowered tier, and this will be all for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and let me know what kind of content you would like to see in the next video. I'll see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day.